you are and whenever you are. Welcome, good souls of the planet and beyond to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Happy holidays to you all. I really do hope that this season goes as smoothly as possible for you, and you get to spend quality time with those that are close to you. I know it's a rough time, so just take moments to pause and just breathe in and don't let the busyness of the season and the gift giving be the problem. Take the time to just enjoy the moments that you have with people. This is not a season that should bring us down, even though it does for so many every year. So I just encourage you to really grab onto the spirit of what the season means for so many different people. Tonight, I'm really, really excited because we've not done a forbidden history piece in quite some time, and specifically where we are discussing the continental U.S. and what has been found. We're going to question the mainstream narrative about the history of mankind's expedition, how humans have traveled from continent to continent, and what they've left behind, when they may have done this, how did they travel, perhaps thousands of years before what mainstream archaeology and traditional history, as we've been taught, tells us. And I'm not saying this as a knock against more conservative archaeologists or historians, because you have to build on what you have that came before you. The real question is, are you able to break out of that when new information comes to light? And I know that most of you listening are probably familiar with the fact that history continues to be altered. We discover new things. The Denisovans, for instance. Who's heard of that until recently as another member of the human species? It's crazy. And they had what we would consider for the Bronze Age, high technology. And this is mainstream archaeology confirming that. What they were able to do with drills and carving of instruments and the use of instruments and decor, it's fascinating. So you have humans as we know ourselves, you have Neanderthals and Denisovans, and then when we look at the whole human tree, there are a multitude of offshoots of hominids. So that is a perfect example. I think most of us are familiar with how our understanding of the human evolution and history has been changed and accepted. In fact, presented by paleontologists and the scientific community. So that's exciting. But for some reason, when it comes to when things were built, whether it be the pyramids, some would argue 12,500 years ago they were built. Archaeology as it is now, it's about 3,000 years ago they're estimating, 2,500 or 3,500 years ago, and that's a huge difference. So how can that be? How can one person look at the evidence and see something completely different? Well, I guess mainstream would say there's just too much counter evidence, but I think that's unfair. And our guests tonight are going to take us on a journey that I think will excite you all, because I've always thought that if human beings were around walking around for 1 million years, and for the better half of that had evolved brains not unsimilar to where we are now, how did we just stick in our little tribes in one place and do minor migrations from here to there? It's built into our species to be enormously, deeply curious about the world around us. In fact, that's why the Denisovans made art and religious seemingly religious artifacts, and the Neanderthals as well, and us humans as we know it, because we wonder. It's built into us. What is beyond? And we can mean that spiritually, or we can mean that in the physical world. And so, as we learn the history, and those who are familiar with Bruce Fenton, a past guest of mine, he talks about the exit out of southern Africa into Australia. Humans evolve and then return to Africa, and he's getting a lot of heat for that because it counters the current narrative that we know at the out of Africa theory. Graham Hancock has his back, and if you're familiar with Graham Hancock, he is a leader in the field of alternative history or archaeology, if you will. And so I have to question, did we really, for hundreds of thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, not go beyond our borders, our countries? I understand we had to live, we had to survive, and that's number one, taking care of yourself, your family, and your tribe. But I think you'll find out tonight that, and we'll post images as we go along in the KGRA chat room. So I implore you to go to the KGRA chat room and keep your eye out for the images I'll be posting to go along with tonight's story. That does seem to indicate that there were at least Chinese explorers thousands of years ago here in the United States. So Mike Rogers will be joining us a little bit later. And now I'm going to bring on, our special guest tonight, Richard Gonsalves, who is the president of the Southwest Petroglyph Society, to get us kickstarted and explain this mystery to us. Richard, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, thank you. I really am excited about this because I feel like every week, every month, there's some new addition to the paleontological, to the artifact history of mankind, and petroglyphs are a part of that. And so this is something that you have a passion for. How did you get involved in the study of petroglyphs in the first place?
I moved to Snowflake, Arizona on my 6th birthday. So I've lived here and have gone out hiking my whole life. Mm-hmm. We have a canyon just north of town that's just full of petroglyphs, and it was one of my favorite places to go and do picnicking and whatever my whole life. And I've always looked at the petroglyphs and tried to imagine who made them and why and what they mean. Nobody really knows what petroglyphs mean. We can only surmise. Mm-hmm. And just fairly recently, I met a man, John Rushkamp, that has found Chinese symbols in the petroglyphs. And he and I have gone out looking, and we found quite a few of them. And I know the country, and I know the petroglyphs, and so I've taken him out. He takes them and analyzes them and comes up with a Chinese symbol that matches it, and then he sends them off to, I believe, Taiwan, Korea, and has them verified. And so he's got a lot more knowledge on it. I'm just the one that finds the petroglyphs.
But isn't that the fun part?
Yes, definitely is. And I'm always looking for something besides a lizard or a bighorn sheep or something like that. I'm not interested in those. I'm interested in a petroglyph that you look at it and, why would anybody do this? And those are the ones that normally turn out to be of Chinese origin.
Right. Well, at some point, I suppose you would be familiar with the symbols or the letters, like the one for Supreme God, D.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When you go out there now, are you looking for those same symbols, and do you find them more than once?
Oh, yes. The Supreme God we've only found once. Mm-hmm. I found that one. It was in a prominent location. People could see it from quite a ways away. And so I knew it had, some significant meaning. And I brought John Rushkamp out to look at it, and then he matched it up with the Chinese symbol for Supreme God.
Right. So I think one of the first questions most people would have in their mind is, and I'm sure this is asked of any petroglyph that's out there, is how do you know that somebody didn't do this, much later, well into more modern times?
There are some graffiti. I know of some that have been made back in the 1915s, and you can see the weathering on them. You can also see the Indian occupation in our area was predominantly between 1250 and 1450. And so most of those are fairly light colored, but then you see some that are just really faded away, and they can be 3, 5, maybe even 10,000 years old.
And can you tell just by looking at it, or do you have to do any other analysis?
Well, some of the older petroglyphs are being written on top of with a newer petroglyph that's 800 years old. And it's covering up the older ones. And you can tell that, the older one is barely visible. And then you have the 800 year on top of it.
Okay. All right. And of all of the petroglyphs that you've uncovered, is it only been Chinese that have been, these ancient Chinese symbols that have been out of place?
Most of the ones that I have found has been a single symbol. John's found some that have multiple symbols on them. And they're Chinese, but not modern Chinese. This is back 3,000 years ago when the Chinese first started to write. They were trying to make a picture, but it was in a shorthand. It didn't look like whatever they were drawing, but it had some of the elements as shorthand to just remind you of what it could be. So it doesn't look like a picture, and it doesn't look like modern Chinese.
Right. And what period would you date these symbols to?
John, some of them are what's known as oracle bone, which in China they started finding buried scapular bones in the 1899, I believe it was. But it was a form of writing that they didn't know. And it wasn't until 1977 that they actually started translating them. Mm-hmm. So the writing had been lost for hundreds or thousands of years.
Right. So this isn't what you're saying is this is not post-colonialism.
Right.
What would be the absolute closest in time to us now that this could possibly be based on the symbols?
Like I said, the oracle bones started about, I think it was 1400 BC. And, of course, all the scribes did their own thing. Mm-hmm. People couldn't read each other's writing. And so through the years, the emperor would come in and tell them, you've got to learn a new way, simplify it, and standardize. And so the Chinese writing has changed through the years, and there could be big gaps between the changes. And whenever they made a change, the old style would be outlawed. And so you find a real sharp cutoff between the old style writing and the new style.
That's funny. So, I guess there would have been punishment if one used the old writing.
Yes. Uh-huh.
That is crazy.
And they had to go back and translate their old stuff
Mm-hmm.
into the new form of writing, and then destroy the old stuff.
Well, I guess scribes were never, short on employment.
Well, since you're the only one that can read your writing, it was job security. But the emperor didn't want job security. If you died, everything that you wrote down is now worthless.
Sure. Yeah. So does that mean that the Chinese currently have old records of a multitude of different versions of their language?
Yes.
Now, and then when you say that the language, the written language changed, was it just the how it was written, or were there other grammatical changes or vocabulary changes that were also implemented?
I'm not an expert on any of this, and I'm just an enthusiast, and I can only speculate on part of that.
Okay.
And I really don't have a lot of knowledge on history. John Rushkamp is where I get my information from, and he's got experts in China that has been able to read some of these, and they say some of them, not only can they read them, they rhyme.
They rhyme?
Yes. They're in cartouche quatrain form.
Oh, okay. Now, wait, you're talking about the petroglyphs?
Yes, and I have not found those. He's found them over in the Albuquerque area.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you see his book, it's on the cover of his book.
Right. Okay, so I was asking Mike this earlier. Is there something about Snowflake in particular that these anomalies, UFO incidents, paranormal incidents occur? Do you think there's anything particularly special about this area of Arizona?
Yes. It's a very high desert, and the Indians had to live along the rivers and creeks, and of course that's where you'd find the people, the population. That'd be where they lived. And if you followed from village to village, and especially the Chinese explorers,
Mm-hmm.
they'd need to eat, they'd need to get fed, and they'd need a guide to take them from one village to another village so they could get fed in the next village.
Right.
There's not enough wild game to just go out and shoot dinner tonight,
Sure.
You'd go to bed hungry quite often if you had to do that.
Yeah.
And so they go from village to village, and that's basically follows the river lines, and that's where the modern Route 66 comes in. It follows that basic same along the rivers.
Route 66 goes along the river line.
Yes, in places. I mean, it jumps around, but they had to have water and food. And so you may leave one river and go to another river, but you did have to have food and water on a daily basis.
Would you be more likely to find petroglyphs near the bodies of water?
Yes, they're in the canyons. There is a canyon that goes from Snowflake to Holbrook.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever you can get down into the canyon, you usually find petroglyphs. And if there's areas that you can't get down, even if you walk along the bottom, there are no petroglyphs.
Okay.
It's only where they could get down.
All right. Well, we're going to have to take our first break, Richard. There's so much more to cover, and I'm really happy that you've come on tonight to take us down this road. This is Alan B. Smith, Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. Stand by. We will be right back.
Candle burns bright, the moon is light. If you kiss another, we can be both cold.
Radio is your interactive alternative talk media. Sponsored by the Paranormal Radio app, the KGRA rolls out its new high-definition call-in phone lines. 855-472-5483. That's 85-KGRA-LIVE. The Paranormal Radio app hotline gives our listeners the ability to call in and interact with your favorite host. Post questions for the guest. And win KGRA swag like t-shirts, books, DVDs, conference tickets, and more. Your interactive alternative talk media. KGRAradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Sobbs.
And this is Warren Brager.
And we just wanted to stop by and wish all of the KGRA family a happy, safe, healthy, and joyous holiday season.
This is Paranormal Now.
Welcome back once again to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your grateful host. Taking us out of the break was My Own Light by Septembrio. If you want to find out more about Septembrio, just go to septembrio.com. And if you're curious about even more paranormal content, just go to the KGRA website and you can find so many great shows. Everything from strict conservative ufology to ancient biblical history and the mystical with those like AJ Rasmussen. So go to the KGRAradio.com website and just check out all the shows. There's so many great personalities and people. It's a really wonderful family, and I thank you all for hanging out with us here tonight as usual. My guest tonight is Richard Gonsalves. So let me repeat that. Not Gonzalez, which I said earlier. It's Gonsalves. So I do apologize. Correction on my part. And I had emphasized those S's and underlined them. Somehow I just still messed that up. So Richard, thanks for a good sport.
Yeah, I am Americanized as it's Gonsalves.
Gonsalves. But wouldn't it be Gonsalves?
Yeah, without an accent. Gonsalves.
Gonsalves. Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Well, I'm trying to learn Spanish right now, so anytime I see a word that looks like
it's actually Portuguese. So.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, I just showed my ignorance twice tonight. Okay.
Well, living in Arizona, I have a hard time with that one.
There you go. Fair enough. All right. Well, I do want to get your take. We'll get back more to the specifics of this Chinese petroglyphs,
right.
But in general, reading what you've read growing up until now, and having conversations with those like Mike Rogers, which hopefully we'll get on here soon. Where would you tell us our actual history is, to the best of your knowledge or opinion, compared to what we've been taught in school?
There's a lot of mysteries out there, and to still be discovered. The petroglyphs show a tie to the Aztec Indians in Mexico City. The Aztecs say they came from the mountains in the north. But, of course, they didn't know where the mountains were. And in my opinion, they may be in Springerville, Arizona. There's a Quetzalcoatl effigy in Springerville that John Rushcamp went out in the museum's backyard and found the effigy and actually brought it out and put it in the museum now. It had been lost. Nobody knew what it was. And it was a carved Quetzalcoatl, which is the Aztecs' god, the flying feathered serpent. And it's in Springerville. So there's a tie there. We don't know if the Aztecs came from Springerville or possibly southern Utah, or whether just the culture had a cultural exchange. That's just another part of the petroglyphs that is just a mystery.
Right. So to build on that a little bit, we learn things, right? And so with knowledge that we have, I say we, the scientific community, archaeologists, create a hypothesis or a theory next on what they believe happened based on that. How does it go from just a hypothesis to a firmly held theory that is unshakable in their eyes?
Well, again, I'm not an expert. I got into the petroglyphs after I retired, and I've done photography. I've taught Photoshop at our local college for 3.5 years. And by teaching the Photoshop and talking to somebody showing him my petroglyphs, he was into it. He was the president of the archaeological club. And when he stepped down, he appointed me president. So anyway, this is something that I haven't had any formal training in. It's just going out and looking at nature and the petroglyphs that we have.
Right, but without formal training, the question still remains, why would anyone hang on to a hypothesis and be so seemingly unopen to alternative theories?
Well, a lot of people have written books and they just don't want to drop their book,
They don't want to, I guess, unessential anymore or relevant?
Right.
Okay. So, but for you, it's not about a grant that you're going to get.
Right.
So for you, you're just looking at this as an enthusiast. And so, are you publishing any books?
I haven't yet. John Rushcamp is a very good friend of mine, and of course he's published his book, Asiatic Echoes. Okay.
See, now, people will eventually say, once you publish a book on anything alternative, they're going to end up, someone's always going to accuse you of just doing it to make a quick buck. And I really think that's unfair. I think a lot of alternative enthusiasts and researchers, independent ufologists, and whatever it might be, it's like anything else in life to me. If you enjoy doing it, why shouldn't you make a living doing it, or just make some money on the side doing it as a hobby or whatever it might be? I don't see where the negative charge is there,
Right.
Yeah.
I can't speak, for everybody, and archaeology does move slowly. Again, the ancient Chinese symbols, even the scribes couldn't read each other's writing. So when we find a petroglyph, it's not going to be a carbon copy of something. It'll have most of the elements of it, but it's not going to be a carbon copy. Even in English, your handwriting looks different than my handwriting.
Right, absolutely, especially if we're talking cursive.
Right.
Right. So that's the next thing is in the writing. Is there a narrative that you see playing out? Is there a repetitive theme at all, or?
Well, this is something that I'm looking at. I'm finding petroglyphs that are similar, but I have no idea what they mean. But when I start seeing something repeat, somebody's trying to say something here. If they keep repeating some of the same symbols, and so I'm looking for these types of things, but there are no subtitles or captions on the rocks.
Right.
Nobody will really know what they mean except for the person that put it there.
How do you know? How do you not know if perhaps maybe migrants from South America or Native Americans themselves at some point had similar symbols, and they could be mistaken for Chinese symbols.
Right. There's when you analyze them, you just find out what as many similar items.
Right.
Is there a line to the left, a line to the right? Is it straight? Is it curved? Is it you go down the list? Yes, no. And at the end, you say, well, this one is 78% matches a Chinese symbol. It's rare that it's exactly 100%. And like I said before, everybody's handwriting is different. To find a carbon copy you're not going to find exact carbon copies.
Right, and I guess statistically, if you're finding a number of petroglyphs that all match Chinese symbols, that the odds are just astronomical that another group of people
Right.
would combine those same symbols.
Right. And again, looking at them, you can't tell whether it was a Chinaman that wrote it down or whether it was an Indian or whoever wrote it down.
Mm-hmm.
But you can say they had the knowledge when they wrote it down. And that could be some of the things, someone from China could have come over and taught an Indian, or they observed them and copied them. And so some of the other petroglyphs might be made by an Indian that he learned from a Chinaman or copied from a Chinaman.
Right, interesting. I mean, what do you... As we understand, Native Americans weren't a seafaring people, right, for the most part.
Right.
It's not that they didn't go out to sea a little bit and from the education that I had growing up, essentially canoes, right, for fishing.
Right.
Yeah. Compared to the Chinese, I mean, I know that there was a period of time where there was a Polynesian sort of explosion, I guess, of exploration.
Right.
Throughout over the seas, and I think they even reached the Atlantic, and clearly were able to make it to Hawaii, Easter Island,
Mm-hmm.
and so if they were able to get to these bodies of water in the middle of the ocean, a grand ocean, they surely were capable of continuing on if they wanted to, right, to the west coast of the United States.
Right. There's ample evidence that a lot of that has happened through history. I've read where there's a tribe of Indians in Peru, I think it is, that look Japanese. Their pottery is Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
They've had ancient chicken bones. Supposedly the chickens were brought over by the Europeans. And another thing is there was a genetic mutation in the Japanese only. Well, they found mummies in Peru that have that same genetic malfunction. So
interesting, right?
To the Japanese.
Yeah. So now my understanding, because I know a great deal of genetic testing has been done, is that the people of the Native Americans of North America and South America do have a distinct genetic line and feature, but there are some shared genes that came from the other part of the world. And
right.
So is it possible then, let's say they migrated by land, right? And worked their way down south, over, Bering Strait, through North America, South America, and then their own gene line developed to distinguish itself from other people on the planet. Is it possible that then, let's say, a small cadre of people from Japan or someone interbred, and it would be so diluted that it wouldn't really ping on the genetic
right?
Is that I know it's pure speculation, but what do you think?
I think that's probably what most mainstream would probably say.
Yeah.
The tribe that I was talking about in Peru, I believe it is, they're closer aligned with the Japanese. The Zunis seem to share a lot of words in their language with Japanese. And the Zuni language is a language all of its own. There is no other group of people in the world that talks in a similar language.
Okay,
it's unique, all of its own.
Right. And geographically, when people were exploring out of Polynesia, it wasn't a straight latitude line,
Right.
But did they have the understanding of longitude and latitude? Because I know maps like the Reese Pier, what is it called? There's a Pinkerton map. Are you familiar with the Pinkerton map?
No. I was looking up maps yesterday, and I've noticed there was several older maps from China that looks like they've included North and South America. So there are maps out there, maybe not 3,000 years old, maybe only in the 1500s.
Well, what I was thinking in terms is the Peary Reese map.
Oh, yes.
You're familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. So apparently it was compiled from previous older maps. I think he said that he took some maps from that were somehow saved from the Library of Alexandria, and that he used those pieces of map to create his map. Now, that when you look at the map itself, it's so precise. One would only imagine that they do have the capability of precise navigation and not just meandering as best they can
right
across the ocean. What technology do we actually need? Not much, I suppose, right? It's just a matter of mathematics.
You're out of my expertise, but I find all these things very interesting, and without proof on any of them, it's kind of speculation.
Sure, but the point is that the Peary Reese map was unbelievably accurate for its time in 15 ever, and it showed parts of this planet that were yet explored.
Right.
It was really
in Antarctica.
Yeah, in Antarctica in particular, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that there's ample evidence between that and the Pinkerton map, and that something did happen. There was this grand exploration. Well, I shouldn't say grand, but there was exploration.
Right.
And do you think that maybe somehow, and I'm going on a limb here, but somehow this ties into a world civilization, something like Atlantis, that there was a much larger, wider interconnectivity between all these countries or geographical locations?
Well, like I stated before, there are lots of mysteries out there still to be discovered, and I'm feeling very lucky that I'm able to make some of these connections to some of the mysteries, and at least in my mind, I'm solving some of them.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and it's eternally fascinating for me. I mean, we know down in South America with LIDAR, they're finding that there are enormous amount of ruins underneath the jungle floor that were previously unknown. The earliest explorers had made reports about these cities, right? But then they were
right.
It was overgrown over a period of 50 years or 100 years or something. And when they went back, they're hey, there's no cities here. But now we know there were, and that there are populations in the millions and millions.
Yeah, there's one petroglyph that I've found here in Snowflake that it shows a human figure with an elongated skull. There are elongated skulls, mummies in Paracas, Peru.
Yeah. Actually, Richard, hold it right there because we're at the second break. So We'll continue on with that when we get back on the other side. I love this conversation. This stuff just really, really tickles me. So I'm excited to come back and continue speaking with Richard Gonsalves. This is Alan B. Smith on KGRA Radio. We will be right back.
That's the wrong way. You're lost in a bad way. Starting to let go. Gone too far the wrong way. Can take it all back now.
Find the podcast on iTunes, iHeart, and Spotify. KGRARadio.com. This is Paranormal Now.
Lost in a bad way, cost me my family. Chaos around me, can't hear my heart say, hey, that's the wrong way. Hey, that's the wrong way. Hey, that's the wrong way. That's the wrong way. You're lost in a bad way. Starting to let go. Gone too far the wrong way. Can take it all back.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your host, and tonight, guess what? We got him. Mike Rogers is with us. Our conversation, of course. Yeah, we do a lot of speculation on Paranormal Now, and that's what's so interesting too, is the mystery of what we don't know, with the hope of one day finding out. So, Mike, I know you've come into the conversation a little bit late, and earlier I had asked Richard about what it is about Snowflake that so much weirdness seems to surround it. What's your take on that, Snowflake, Arizona?
Well, first of all, I've been listening to this whole program up until now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'm aware of everything that's come down so far. What is my take on my main thing is, first of all, I'm an enthusiast. I'm like Richard. I am not an expert. I don't claim to be. I find it extremely interesting that this expedition, whenever it took place, 3,000 some years ago, apparently went right through Snowflake, because there's a number of Chinese-looking petroglyphs right there in that canyon that he described. Is actually opens up into a canyon right in the north end of Snowflake and goes north from there all the way up to Holbrook. That's very interesting to me, besides the fact that many years ago, when Richard and I were in high school and right out of high school, in college, whatever, we used to go down and kick around in those canyons, and we would find those petroglyphs, and we were very interested then, but we didn't know what they meant. And actually now we still don't know what they mean. We just know that some of these so-called experts have attributed them to Chinese, and that seems to be more of a fact than opinion anyway, at least according to the experts. But Richard knows more about that than I do, because he's more directly connected.
Yeah. But your personal opinion, do you think that it's possible that humans really did explore the seas, or do you think that the people who left these petroglyphs came by land?
Well, they came to Snowflake by land. I don't, but as far as arriving in ships, yeah, they must have, because I don't think they walked across the land bridge, because that disappeared way before that, and they would have had to have gotten here by land. I mean, by sea anyway. And there is some evidence of that, as Richard has already pointed out, that there are these sea anchors, these big rocks, donut-looking things that apparently were used by the Chinese way back when. And Rushkemp thinks that they were seafaring and then came to the coast, the west coast. So other than that, yeah.
Well, also on that same thing, there are writings in China that talk about the land to the east, the land of the rising sun. They talk about a giant canyon that the sun and moon rise out of. They talk about birds that can fly backwards, which is only a hummingbird can fly backwards.
Yep.
And they're only in the Americas. So how could someone in China be writing about these things? And there's also plants and animals that have been transplanted from one continent to the other continent. The Zunis had peaches. Peaches came from China. How did the Zunis get peaches when the Americans started moving across the continent? They found the Hopis or the Zunis had peaches.
Right. Well, that's like in Egypt where they found tomato and corn.
Yes.
In these burial chambers.
And cocaine.
And cocaine, correct.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why I asked earlier, was it,
So there was some trade going on. There was plants and animals that came both directions.
Right. So they must have been aware of each other. Now, so in terms of how we think, right? We have a record of everything that we do.
Right.
Is it reasonable to think that these things were occurring and it wasn't really of any significance and for them to keep records? I mean, I don't know much about Egyptian records.
Well, you made a comment that some of the libraries were sacked and burned and they lost a lot of knowledge. That could have happened in many areas. In China, why not?
Well, yeah, I guess you're right. That could explain it. And Egyptians were often more obsessed with telling their own story and the story of their myths, that perhaps, what was happening outside with trade was not of the most importance to put down in hieroglyphs. I don't know.
Right. Well, there's lots of mysteries yet to be discovered. That's for sure.
Why do you think that we have a desire to leave our mark wherever we go?
People have egos.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly.
All those explorers are just a bunch of egomaniacal.
They seem to be.
Well, what, Mike? You've. I don't mean to steer the conversation too far in another direction, but you've had an experience, a close-up experience with a UFO, and so there is this idea of contact that maybe it's not just humans, but any intelligent life has the desire to make contact wherever they go.
It seems to be. However, the thing that I experienced with Travis Walton back in 1975 doesn't seem to be a desire on the part of the alien beings to make contact. It seems more like a desire to be somewhere, kind of like sneaking up on something, or like just being there for some other reason, and then we just happened upon them. That's what it really seems like. So, make contact. Well, I can tell you this. Humans certainly seem to have the ego for making contact and exploring all they can, and then imposing their will upon wherever they go.
Right. That's true. Have you seen any indications, Richard or Mike, in the petroglyphs that correlate these Chinese explorers, suspected Chinese explorers, with anything spiritual or supernatural in their symbolism?
Well, you've found some of that, haven't you, Richard?
Well, I was just going to say the Zunis and the Hopis, and I'm sure a lot of the other Indian tribes talk about star people coming down and helping them, or the ant people. Clifford Mahudi is a good friend of mine, and I asked him one time, what are the ant people? And he wanted to go out and see petroglyphs to see if maybe they were ant people. And he didn't know what ant people were. He didn't know. I asked him, do they live underground? Do they look like ants? Why do you call them ant people? Mm-hmm. And he said, our legends just call them ant people.
Well, if I may, if one were to encounter way back when something that is akin to a gray, let's say the typical gray that you see, with the big, large black eyes, one could, if they were to refer in their mind, what does that remind them of? It would be an insect, something with large eyes. If you see an ant's head, it's very similar to the look of the typical gray alien's head. And so if you start referring to them as ant people, maybe when you do the symbols, maybe when you draw them, you would just add antennas to indicate, right? Like, these are the ant people, so that you're not confused. You know what you're drawing. It doesn't mean they may have actually had antennas.
Let's see. It doesn't look like I sent you one of those pictures with an insectoid-looking character with antenna. But yes, around Snowflake there's a lot of petroglyphs with insectoid-looking beings, and some of them are fairly recent, and some of them are extremely old, and I would guess in the 3 to 5, maybe even 10,000 year range.
3 to 5 or 10,000? That's wow. Okay.
They're much, much, much older than the ones in the 1200s.
Well, it's interesting because, I don't know, I guess you would think that if aliens did come down here and people saw them and wrote them down on rock, that it would be not just North America, but South America as well, or right? Just like you saw the petroglyph that reminds you of the elongated skulls.
Right.
Was there any indication that there are other symbols in the petroglyphs that reminded you of South America, or vice versa?
Well, I can tell you this.
Other than the Quetzalcoatl, I've seen quite a few petroglyphs that are the feathered serpent. They look more like the sea serpent that goes up and down rather than a rattlesnake that goes side to side. And
that would be a Quetzalcoatl?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is the Aztec god of the feathered serpent.
Right. Now, the serpent, the idea of a serpent god, that's fairly universal.
Right. The Chinese had the dragons, which can fly and have scales. And,
right.
They're very similar to the Quetzalcoatl.
Right. And the Aboriginals in Australia had a serpent, a rainbow serpent that could fly as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any universal meaning that we can apply to why all these different cultures around the world would have this shared symbol?
Well, if you're referring to some of the UFOs. UFOs don't have wings, as far as I know. And so if you see something flying in the sky without wings, and it's a long cigar-shaped looking thing, you might think it more of a serpent. If you were a Native American and you didn't have metal, no machinery, and you see something flying in the sky, how would you describe it? And if it landed and people got out of it and went back in it, you would say they were eating them. Kind of Jonah and the whale idea. Maybe that's where the Quetzalcoatl came from, if you're thinking in the UFO terms.
Well, that is interesting. Yeah, the cigar shaped craft could be interpreted that way, or not literally believed to be a snake, but the snake used as a symbol to describe it.
What other words would you use if you have no machinery, no metal? You can only describe it by what's in your world, which would be a snake.
Right, which makes more sense, because you wouldn't describe it as a log.
Right.
How do drawing a log is just a line, right? So
or something that eats people.
Right. So the snake, it fits both those descriptions, and it's recognizable. So that makes much more sense. Have you ever seen a UFO yourself, Jonathan?
I've seen lights in the sky, and that I can't explain. That say what it is. I can't say I saw something. It wasn't a cigar. It was just some lights.
Yeah, I'd ask you, Mike, but I know you have.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've seen a few.
Right. What do you think that, Mike? What do you think that history of seafaring cultures was like? Do you really think that we were much more advanced than we think we were?
Well, I think the Chinese were. Over 3,000 years, they had a written language, and they had a society, a organized society. It might not have been the perfect society, but it was certainly organized and had a language. So it's entirely possible that they were here, and there's all kinds of evidence of that. We don't know where they went, how they went. We know a few came through Snowflake, Arizona. That's pretty much established. But other than that, we don't know much about it. Just the fact that the Chinese were an organized people with the language, and apparently were seafaring, because there's evidence of that as well. Now, one thing I was going to say, when you were explaining those ant people about these beings with big, large eyes, what Richard was just talking about, no way in your experience to explain certain things like dragons or whatever. How could anybody explain these little grays if they saw those grays? I mean, the most likely thing is that they would think of them as ants, or describe them that way. So the fact that Richard Mahudi says, hey, we have that history of ant people, even though he can't exactly explain what they mean by that, it seems logical that gray aliens or white alien, whatever they were, small bodies with big eyes, it just fits that bill pretty good, doesn't it?
I think so.
But yes.
But then there's that interaction aspect of all of that. That's what I think is the most profoundly stumping aspect of UFOs, because we don't just have UFOs in the sky. We don't just have eyewitnesses of beings. They seem to interact with us, and that's what's confounding.
Yeah, it is. And I'm a realist, so I don't interpret that stuff directly. I just kind of let everybody else do that. As far as the petroglyphs are concerned, I'm just an enthusiast. It's Richard doesn't say he's an expert, but he obviously knows far more than I do.
Fair enough. Richard, have you seen anything that really just sort of blew your mind?
I can't think of any, one item. Of course, do a little happy dance if I find something really interesting, a mystery that's solved. But a lot of times you'll see something, and it won't be until later that I'll go back and look through my pictures and find things that I'd missed while I was out walking. I've taken a picture of it, but it doesn't. You don't see it until later. I was comparing petroglyphs with John Rushkamp, and I was showing him some that I'd taken in New Mexico, and all of a sudden he just, wow, stop right there. And he ran out to his car and came back with his computer, and he brought up the exact same petroglyph in the Mojave Desert in California that matched the one I found in the Tularosa River in New Mexico. And they're just absolutely identical. And it matches a Chinese petroglyph of mother. But there's two of them, so it might be the mother of mother or grandmother or motherland, or, we're still speculating. We don't exactly know what it means, except they're identical.
All right, so everyone listening, we're going to open up the phone lines for you to call in and ask your questions of our guests or myself. And I do want to hear what you have to say, because some of you guys out there have some of the best questions. And so, yes, call in now, 85-KGRA live, 85-KGRA live, and we'll get your call and we'll get you on the air. So, Richard, I know I kind of dragged you into the paranormal conversation a little bit.
Yes.
So is that something that's even an interest to you at all, or just a passing conversation that you've had with people like Mike?
Well, I've known Mike and Travis for years. I met Travis when he was 17, a junior in high school, and we were best friends. And I was best friends with Mike all through high school. And so I've known their story, and we've talked about these things. But the petroglyphs have more than one mystery. UFOs may be part of it. The Chinese is part of it. The Mesoamerica is part of it. It's just all kinds of things that are of interest, and some of them overlap.
Right. So petroglyphs on their own, how long have human beings been actually creating them throughout time? What's the oldest dates that we have?
There's one they found in, I think it's in Nevada, that next to a lake that they figure is at least 14,000 years old in the Americas. Now, in Australia or other areas, cave drawings in France, they may be going back hundreds of thousands of years.
So hundreds of thousands of years, that does indicate, obviously, that we were intelligent enough to be creative and to construct symbols, which argues that humans have been smart for a really long time. So why would we have been caged into our little zones for such periods of times without really going out there? I mean, look at us. Within a short span, we're going out into space. So we're going to go to our first call here. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello. I'm Charles from Ohio. How are you?
Hey, Charles. Good. How are you?
Good to talk to you again. Excuse me. I've got a question. I did have a question on how these particular petroglyphs that related to the Chinese writing were dated. It has something to explain. I mean, how are they, and about when? What kind of span are we talking?
Well, if I understand you right, you're asking how do we date the petroglyphs?
Yes.
most petroglyphs are dated by the pottery that's found in the same area, and those are going to be in the 1250 to 1450 date. The ones that John Rushkamp is finding and matching up to ancient Chinese, it's the Chinese writing, the date that they were using those symbols, and that could be as much as 3,000 years ago. That doesn't mean the person that wrote them was 3,000 years ago. It's just the knowledge of the symbol is 3,000 years old. It could be 2,000, 1,000, but the knowledge is older.
So you're presupposing that there's an ongoing Chinese outpost of their civilization in the Americas?
Some of this is speculation, and
sure,
the knowledge has made it across, and but again, I don't know if it was a Chinaman that carried the knowledge or whether he taught it to an Indian, and an Indian carried the knowledge.
Have you ever heard of Gavin Menzies? He's a writer who's done a couple of books about Chinese navigation.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, you should check him out. He's got some very interesting things about that he's done about that he's done studies about the great Chinese navigators of the 1400s.
Oh yes,
which would be toward the end of your period.
Compass.
Yes,
they had compasses
absolutely.
And other things that made it possible for them to cross the ocean both directions, and
yes.
So it's possible, and in my opinion, it happened.
One other thing, one of my other people in the chat room, had brought up the similarity to some of these petroglyphs to the work on plasmas by Dr. Robert Schock. That some of the really old ones were actually representations of plasma storms that happened or could have happened, or they think might have happened back at the end of the Ice Age. So that might be another avenue that you might want to look into. And we're going to thank Maria for that one.
Have there ever been, I guess all three of you, if you have any knowledge, has there been any evidence of artifacts from possibly Chinese or Polynesian explorers in the continental U.S.?
I think I have heard of anchors being found, for one.
Yes.
Well, Rushkamp found a society that's further up north that dates way back, and there was artifacts in that. Is that correct, Richard?
That was another in, I can't think of the name. It's up in Oregon, I think it is.
Yeah.
Something Bend. They found the oldest civilization that they've known about, and it dates back about 14,000 years old.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was another thing about chickens. But chickens are ordinarily come from Southeast Asia, and that there were actually pre-Columbian chickens.
Yes.
Well,
so there's a lot of evidence.
Right, but see, that's my question. Is that we find this out of place, seemingly out of place evidence. What are the responses from the archaeologists when these things are found?
It must have just slipped in from another level when they're doing their dig. Obviously, it's obviously an error. It can't possibly be there because it doesn't fit the story.
So the explanation typically is somehow slid into the dig that we as professionals were regulating under our strict guidelines, and somehow it got there.
I'm sure a great deal of it is. It's constantly it's a constant rule of thumb that anything that's out of place, just is discarded.
Well, certainly, I suppose mistakes could happen, right? Not with, with chicken bones, but
well, sure.
A lot of evidence has just been set aside, and maybe it'll be put in a drawer, but in the back of a museum somewhere that they'll dig it out in the future. But
all right, Charles, do you have any other questions at all?
No, I think I've pretty much covered all I've got on hand right now. But I really enjoy this program. It's been great.
I really appreciate your support.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night, brother. Happy holidays.
You too.
All right, so what you two, Mike and Richard, what are you guys doing for the holidays?
You both find us laughing. Well, we both have pretty good sized families.
Well, hopefully I've got family coming over, daughter and granddaughter.
Okay.
So.
Do you think that this kind of research that you're doing feeds a sort of spiritual need within us or within yourself?
Well, on my side, I'm not really looking for the spiritual side of it. I'm just looking for mysteries and trying to solve mysteries.
Right, but without actually looking, do you think the inclination to delve into this fulfills something that you need?
Well, all history, why do we study history at all, or archaeology? We like to know, what our ancestors did, where we came from. It's just a passion for me.
All right. What about yourself, Mike?
You bet. Definitely a passion. I'm big into anything that's strange and unusual, especially if it's something real. I'm a realist.
Well, we all are problem solvers. All aspects of our life. You look for problems and you solve them. We don't always look for the good things and be thankful for the good things. You look for the problem and try to fix it. Mm-hmm. So we're all problem solvers.
Well,
That's
I don't think we've always solved the problem. In fact, I don't look at it that way. I look at it as wow. I look at the wow stuff.
Well, yeah, and you're wowing and asking questions every Friday on your own show called the Realist.
Yes,
10 p.m. EST, right?
Right. Yep.
But you are asking questions, Mike.
Yes. In fact, my show intends to get into that even stronger. I'm just building up right now. I've barely been into this, not even 2 months yet, and I've had some in fact, last weekend was the skeptic Michael Shermer.
Right.
And that was a very interesting show.
Yes, you mentioned that to me, and I have not yet listened to that show, and I know that I have to. So I guess, did you move the needle on Michael Sherman a little bit?
Oh, I believe I did, yeah. He kept saying, "You're a skeptic," and I said, no, I'm not. I'm a believing realist, and there is a big difference.
Right. What about yourself, Richard? Did you put yourself in the skeptic, or what camp would you put yourself in when you're looking at this alternative archaeology?
Well, I keep an open mind, and I know that most things aren't, you can't actually prove everything. With Mike and Travis on their UFO, I've been asked, do you believe them? And I'd say, I can't be 100%. I can be 98% sure that what they said was real, but I can't be 100%.
I can't even be 100%. I'm 98% myself.
You know, you can always have something fool you. You just, you have to reserve a little bit because, there is no absolutes, no 100%.
Very true.
Are there any other historical stories that we have just been misinformed on that we haven't talked about tonight?
Yeah, the Phoenix Lights.
Well, there you go. Well, that's one. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very exciting to me because I've been wrapped up in that for the last almost 23 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so everybody who's listening, you can go back and listen to old Paranormal Now shows past few months now with Mike, and we discussed that a number of times.
Yeah.
And if you want to call in again, that number is 85 KGRA Live, 85 KGRA Live to call in and ask our guests a question. So, Mike, but is there another something that we should know about? We know that exploration was grander than, I keep using that word tonight. I don't know why but it was much more prolific than we were used to.
Do I know of anything else other than the Chinese expedition on the whatnot in the Southwest? Well, there are several things that really wow me, but they're kind of complicated. I don't know if I would get into it here. I will be getting into that in future shows on the Realist. Yeah.
Okay. Richard, what about yourself?
That I can't come up with any answer right now.
Yeah. Do you have any other interests in alternative theories?
Yeah, I'm always interested in the unknown, and I'll take a look at anything. Well, there's a lot of mysteries out there, and some of them dovetail together, some of them parallel, some of them diverge. Well,
I think that, for instance, we had mentioned the ancient Egyptians earlier,
right?
And I asked you, Richard, Mike, do you have any theory as to the validity of things like Lemuria or Atlantis?
Well, I don't know about that so much. I do know that there was a guy named Thor Heyerdahl who, several years back, and of course in modern times, actually built a ship that was designed right out of the pyramids. The ancient Egyptians' concept of a vessel, which they used on the Nile, and they built one and they floated it all the way across to South America. And that's the theme of a movie actually that was made, and I saw that on the big screen. I was very interested in that. Other than that, Thor Heyerdahl went to Eastern Ireland, and within very little time carved out another one of those moai that stand up there on the shores of the
Easter
slopes.
Island.
Yeah, Easter Island. That's right. And there's stuff done since then, but I remember he did that, same guy, and that was very amazing because he actually said, I wasn't there personally, but he actually said that they had found one of those up in the quarries in that volcanic rock and chiseled one out, and then they dragged it all the way down and stood it up in a position, and then it became a new moai on the shores of Easter Island.
So we could, if we were to travel to Mars, right? What is the likelihood that astronauts would start chiseling away on rocks to make their mark? Do you think that we would just sort of be compelled to do that?
Well, I think that's old technology. They would have to have been pretty much prehistoric, or at least as far back as the Chinese were when they were chiseling on the rocks, or the Indians, or the Aztecs, or whoever. Basically, because nowadays we have the internet. So they've got to be further back than we are.
Well, that's true. Yeah. I guess I just suspect that, graffiti is sort of built into our nature.
I wouldn't call petroglyphs graffiti.
Well,
I don't think there's
some
no
of it
similar-
is, but
Oh, yeah, maybe.
well, I've always thought that some of them they make lizards and they make bighorn sheep and deer, but then they make just doodles. And I thought, maybe they were just doodling. But now I'm seeing, no, there's some method to their madness. Some of these are actually Chinese, and but again, they're very, very few.
Yeah,
they're very rare.
Well, I think you hit on a really good point there. While some might say some of this could just be, free form thought and doodling, right? They're just like, oh, let me just create something, because that's what we do, right? We create, we draw
Right.
sand, whatever. But to carve something in a rock, and especially if, like you said, it's a singular piece, it would seem to me that there's real intent behind.
Yeah, they certainly didn't have spray paint.
Yes.
Well, again, there's no subtitles or captions or anything else to tell you what they were thinking.
No, and
But,
it makes
and
you,
I'm sure a lot of them were kind of a shorthand. There is something to spark their memory of, something that happened. But, it doesn't have to be a full picture.
Okay. All right. So I've got a phone call here, and we are going live on the air with Al from New Jersey. Al, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Well, thanks for having me on board. Your shows are always terrific. For your guests, are there any university or, let's say, renowned archaeologists partnering on both sides of the Pacific, so to speak, the Chinese and folks on our side, that are discussing or funding and discussing the subjects that you all are touching on tonight? Where are those Indiana Jones types to help pull it all together? Everything you're saying makes great sense, but there doesn't seem to be a connective tissue to pull it together. And do you see that coming?
Well, John Rushkamp has told me that they're actually using his book in Korea and Taiwan and teaching it as history. So, yes, other parts of the world is accepting this and going with it. On our side, there's a lot of resistance. They just don't want to rock the boat, so to speak, and bring out something that nobody has seen. Some of the Indians
Don't you feel
themselves.
that that's kind of contrary to what archaeologists do? Aren't they folks who look to find something new, just if nothing else, just to put their signature on it?
Well, I've had one Native American guy tell me that, he's seen some of these books and stuff, and he thinks it degrades him because they're not smart enough to make the petroglyphs. We have to attribute them to be Chinese or UFOs or something else. And so there is some resistance.
Well,
So
I can understand that to a degree, because that is an argument that comes up certainly with ancient aliens. Because people say, well, hey, wait, our ancestors were smart enough
more smart.
to do these high technologies. Why do we have to attribute to aliens? And in this case, I guess it gets thrown in with that. But petroglyphs all across the U.S. Are not just Chinese petroglyphs. I mean, we know that there are other petroglyphs from Native Americans that were there. So that seems like a little, defensive.
Right.
It's mostly ancient Americans, mostly Indian.
Yeah. All right.
Well, we're all humans, and we've advanced from caveman because we do share knowledge, and to try to attribute everything to we did it without any help is kind of a narrow-minded view. We all share knowledge.
Right. All right. Al, do you have any other questions?
No, that's good. Thanks, folks.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. All right, have a good night. Okay, so we're going to go to our third caller tonight. Carol, you're on the air.
Hello, and I just want to say Merry Christmas. I owe you all kinds of things to put on your show, and I will get to that. I'm enjoying this so much, and this is the kind of thing...
This is Carol.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The Obsidian Curtain on KGRA Radio.
Mm-hmm. Yes, on Friday nights, and as you say, a grateful host without a doubt, and no other way to put it. So hello, Richard, and hello, Mike. As you know, I was a frequent once upon a time back in the day. I was a frequent caller from west of the Rockies to coast, mostly Art Bell, and on one occasion I got to talk to him twice in one night, which was a result of unscreened calls. But be that as it may, often what would happen is I would have a formulated question, sort of, framed more or less coherently, and while I was waiting, something would flash through my mind, often triggered by the guest's conversation. Well, that just happened again, and it seems to go something like this. I'm sort of on board with an interconnectedness, a thing of happenstance, synchronicity, serendipity, but then perhaps if you look deeper into that, something more. I just wondered, has there ever been any research done? Has it ever occurred to anybody that the petroglyphs and the similarities cross-culturally were some result of a download? In other words, other intelligence, not necessarily extraterrestrial, perhaps interdimensional, sort of occurring to a bunch of, vastly separated geographically cultures who then proceeded to make art of them.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Well,
I don't know where it came from. It was downloaded.
Out of my expertise.
Mike, what about yourself?
No, but what's your...
Well, I'm not the one to ask. I'm not definite about anything. I'll consider anything, but I'm not definite about anything. And I only have leanings like Richard. He's 98% certain that Travis and I are telling the truth. Well, I'm only 98% certain that we're telling the truth. I mean, I can't prove it, even though we passed those polygraph tests hands down under the most dire circumstances. That still isn't proof, and I acknowledge that because I'm a realist.
Carol, yes, and I understand that. And I understand. I just want to, if you'll let me just sort of refer a second here, Alan, I understand that percentage, but what if there were no numbers? What does your gut tell you, Mike, Richard? But specifically, Mike, from the beginning, I have always I am so totally on board with Travis's experience and your experience. I accepted it a long time ago. It hit me on a both an emotional and, I guess you could say, an intellectual level. So if we were to not have, for instance, polygraph tests in I don't know. Alan, is that still the thing, that they're not admissible as court evidence? Do you know?
I knew that was the case for a while, but that might be state by state, so I can't say.
Right. And I guess it also, for instance, in the Charles Hickson, Calvin Parker, Pascagoula situation, I think did it not turn on some shade thrown on who was administering this polygraph test? That there are various degrees of expertise or some such?
Yes, and that's only for like one person or two, because like Michael Shermer was pointing out just last Friday night on my show, polygraphs are not admissible in most places. But here's the thing. The experts, the polygraph experts themselves, the National Polygraph Association, anybody who's actually into the polygraph field will tell you that anytime you have 5 people passing a test to the same questions, it is absolutely impossible in their mind for them to be lying. If you have 5 past tests, then that's what happened. And when I tried to explain that to Michael Shore, he's like, "Well, yeah,
oh boy,
it's still, it's still not proof." Well, of course, he's a skeptic, he's biased. But the thing is that these polygraph tests, 5 people passing a test to the same question would convict just about anybody of murder. I mean, just their testimony alone would do that. And yet they can't accept 5 past polygraph tests to mean much of anything. Yeah. At least the skeptics, okay?
It's a really, really good point. Carol, thank you so much for calling in. I'm going to squeeze in one more phone call, and then we've got a couple minutes left.
Absolutely fun to do it. Take care. Great show.
You are the best.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go to our last call of the night. Ron from Minnesota, you are on the air.
Hey, Alan, great show tonight. Thank you for your guests, and thank you for the topic. I live in
got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I live in a small town with a National Historic site called the Southwest Petroglyphs, and they're about 7,000 to 10,000 years old. Mm-hmm. I went there on my own when it was closed. I didn't realize I was not supposed to be up there without a guide or nothing. But I went up there walking, and I could feel and sense some energies there that I couldn't explain. Just saying. So, great show, though. Thank you. And I just want to say happy holidays.
Happy holidays, Ron. Thank you. Thank you, Ron's up.
Talk to you next time.
Absolutely. Bye. Have a good night. I think that's an interesting question as well. I mean, could there... Have you spoken to, let's say, anyone who lives in the area, or maybe Native Americans in the area, that could say to you, Richard, yes, around where these petroglyphs are, a number of strange things occur, or it has spiritual significance, and maybe even the people drawing the Chinese petroglyphs may have been attracted to that?
That's a hard question to answer. I know people see images in clouds and other things. It's called pareidolia, I think it is. I've known people that say they feel energy from crystals and stuff, but I can't verify any of that.
Well, you have.
I remember feeling energy way back when Richard and I were kicking around through those canyons. I mean, I see those petroglyphs, and it gave me a strange feeling. It really did.
That's interesting. Yeah. Sometimes people just get that strange jolt of energy. Mm-hmm. And so, Mike, you've experienced that. Richard, you've had a mild experience with that at all?
I do like to theorize or imagine, and what it would have been like to live 1,000 years ago and live out here in a land where no other people are around. I've had the dreams of that, but
I'd say
to actually feel physically nothing. No.
Well, I certainly would like to see you do your little dance when you have a discovery.
Yeah.
Your own burst of energy.
I'd like to see him dance.
All right. Well, that's it, guys. This was a great night. Thanks so much. Yep. My guests, Richard Gonsalves and Mike Rogers. Thank you again. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now, broadcasting live Tuesdays 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard on KGRAradio.com, your official contact for the best in alternative talk for radio. Join us next week, same time, and special thanks to KGRA producer Grace Hobbs. Until next time, live in the mystery.
On and again, the signs keep on coming, they point to the end, but I hold on so tight. Back and forth in my mind, Leading conclusions I don't wanna find, 'cause I know it's not right.